Let's enter the world of survival horror.
Resident Evil.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to Command and Console. My name is Jason. Today, you've seen it in the title, we are looking at my Resident Evil collection update. So, I haven't really spoke about Resident Evil in a video for a while. The last game I spoke about was Resident Evil Dead Aim, but I have been keeping you up to date in the community tab on what games I've picked up for Resident Evil collection. But I thought I'd go through the games actually in a video of what I've got at the moment, and we're nearing the completion of both the PS1 set and the PS2 set, so I'm excited to have those complete. But yeah, let's get on to the Resident Evil collection update.
Resident Evil Survivor.
So the first game in the update is Resident Evil Survivor. Yes, this is a game that came out in the year 2000. It was a spin-off for the Resident Evil series. It's known in Japan as Biohazard Gun Survivor, and there's 4 games in that series. This game, I remember back in the day, I played it a little while. I think I played a demo of it or something when I was a kid. I didn't like it at all because it was like first person. It was a bit weird. But as an adult, replaying this one, it's not too bad. It's pretty average across the board. It's pretty linear. It's linear, especially when it concerns Resident Evil in general. It's probably the most linear Resident Evil game I've played to date, really. It pushes you forward constantly. You're never ever gonna, get lost on or confused where to go and what to get and what to pick up, because it's just right there. It's always going to be funneling you forward to the completion state, basically. I beat this game in 2 hours and 15 minutes. It's very short. It doesn't really there's no branching paths or any backtracking what to speak of, but I felt like it was a quite enjoyable diversion from the Resident Evil formula, but it does try and deliver a first-person Resident Evil experience that you can enjoy, and the 2 hour mark for me is a sweet spot. I feel, when you get to the point where you don't have much time to play games, a short experience that's like 2-3 hours long is actually quite welcome, and I actually really enjoyed sitting down for one sitting and playing through the whole game. I thought it was fairly enjoyable for that 2 hours. Do I recommend picking it up for the hefty price point of £45, £50, wherever it is these days? Not particularly. I'd wait until you can find it cheaper. Thankfully, I found this fairly affordably on eBay for about 30 quid. So I wasn't too bothered about paying that kind of money for it, especially when I want it in the collection. And it was definitely one that I wanted to add to the set, of course. That's Resident Evil Survivor.
Resident Evil.
The next game is the third of the classic trilogy. Finally picked it up. Resident Evil 3 Nemesis. If you saw the community post, I went all the way into London to Stratford to pick up this title from the Stratford CEX, and because it was the only one I could find on the website that was complete with manual, that was in the local vicinity. I say local, it took me about an hour or so to get there, but it was local enough for me to say it's worthwhile to go and make the journey to Stratford and pick this up. I already had like a £25 voucher anyway, so I only paid £10 on top, so I wasn't really, I wasn't bothered about making the journey there. It's actually really good. This is one of the better condition games I've ever picked up in CEX, especially for the PS1. The hinges are beautifully clean and not broken. The case is really nice. The manual is like barely been touched. And the disc is in really, really good condition as well. Resident Evil 3 Nemesis. I can strongly say this is probably the most nostalgic Resident Evil game for me. I remember playing this one loads as a kid. Even though Resident Evil 2 is probably my favourite in the original trilogy, this one is where all my nostalgia lies. I have loads of nostalgia for it. It's got that sweet spot in my heart. And yeah, it's still a great Resident Evil title. Obviously, it goes in more of that action direction, but I still feel it retains a lot of that survival horror DNA that we know from the first 2 Resident Evils. And I just think it's a really great sequel. It's great. That's Resident Evil 3 Nemesis.
Resident Evil 5.
Next up is a vintage bundle that I picked up for fairly cheap for about £6. Just got the first 2 games in the 360 set. So the first game in the 360 set I picked up was Resident Evil 5 Gold Edition. I specifically went out of my way to look for the Gold Edition because it is I'd say the version to get on 360 out of the standard version. This comes with all the DLC on the disc, so the 2 expansion story mode DLCs, the little campaigns you get on it, Desperate Escape and Lost in Nightmares. Lost in Nightmares in particular is exciting because you go back to the Spencer Mansion in that one with Chris and Jill, so it's a really cool DLC story part there that I really enjoy. It does have costume packs, but unfortunately the costume packs in this gold edition are download codes, so I can't get those. But the expansion, the story campaign expansions were the main meat of this gold edition that made me want to go out and get this one. So yeah, if you want to get those 2 DLC story campaigns for Resident Evil 5, pick up this gold edition. So yeah, so for £6 I got this, and I got another game as well, obviously for the Resident Evil set, but the gold edition, really happy to pick this up. It's in beautiful condition as well with manual, so I'm really happy to get this one. That's Resident Evil 5.
Resident Evil 6.
The second game in the vintage bundle was obviously Resident Evil 6. You can say a lot about Resident Evil 6 and about how bad it is. And it is pretty bad. I won't lie. I don't hate the Leon campaign that much. I think it's okay. I think the Leon campaign's fine. I think the last kind of, the last maybe like last final act part of the game is where it gets really frustrating with really terrible QTE segments and just a generally bad final boss fight in general, in my opinion. I do feel the other campaigns are pretty terrible. I think Chris is fine if you just want that over-the-shoulder Gears of War-esque shooter kind of campaign. I think it's okay. Albert Wesker, his son's campaign is pretty terrible, and Ada's campaign is pretty bad as well. So I'd go as far as saying the only campaign really worth playing for Resident Evil 6 is Leon's campaign, and even then it devolves into just terribleness by the end of the campaign. I don't straight up hate this game that much, but it is probably the lowest point of the Resident Evil mainline series. It's not the worst Resident Evil game ever made, but when it concerns the numbered sequels, it might be the worst one. That's Resident Evil 6.
Resident Evil.
Talking about terrible sequels that cost way too much money than they actually are worth. You saw my review for this on the community tab. Resident Evil Survivor 2. Yeah, Survivor 2 is more like a straight up arcade shooter. It's it's all about taking your coins in those arcade machines back in the back in the 2000s whenever this game came out in Japan. But it baffles me that Capcom took this out of arcades. It doesn't work very well on PS2. The controls are really awful. Even though I got used to them after a while, it is cumbersome, just very unintuitive controls in my opinion. There's just not much game here for the price tag. This game usually sells for around £70–75. Unfortunately, that's a bit too much for me. I paid 50, and the reason I only paid 50 for this is that this is the German release of the game. But thankfully, the cover art is no different, and the disc plays in English perfectly fine. The only difference here is the back text is in German and the manual's in German. Doesn't bother me. It's in my collection. I don't recommend this game. It's pretty terrible. There's not much meat on the bones at all. It's pretty much, the arcade mode has 5 stages. I kept dying on stage 4. It can get addictive in that arcade competitive, like I need to beat this round, I need to get to the other round kind of stuff. But aside from that, there's not really any game here really. There really isn't. Maybe in an arcade scenario, it actually might be a bit more entertaining when you actually got the big, the big light gun in your hand and you're just running around shooting stuff. But for a PS2 game on a controller, it's not fun at all. So I don't recommend this one. It might be the worst Resident Evil game that's ever been put out, in my opinion. That's Resident Evil Survivor 2.
Resident Evil.
Next up, we have the game that inspired Survivor 2, because it's based on this game's events. Resident Evil Code Veronica X. Yeah, I was just like missing out on this one, and I've noticed that trying to find the black label version in the wild is very difficult. I had to go on eBay to get this in the end. I find that in CX I tend to find only the platinum version of this title. I'm really happy to pick this up on eBay. I think I paid like £5, not even that. Just nothing. The only downside with this release, it doesn't come with the Devil May Cry demo, so I might have to hunt that down separately for this release. But yeah, that is Resident Evil Code Veronica X on the PS2. I love this game. I think it's the last true like classic Resident Evil title. You know, static camera angles. The difference with this game is the actual backgrounds are in 3D, proper 3D. They're no longer pre-rendered. I still feel the GameCube version is a better port than this, and I think the Dreamcast original is the way to play it, in my opinion. If you play the Dreamcast version through VGA cables, no other port looks as good as that, in my opinion. But it's cool to have this one in the collection to complete the set almost. But that is Resident Evil Code Veronica X.
Resident Evil 4.
The final game in this Resident Evil collection update is a lot of people's favourites, not mine though, but it's Resident Evil 4 on the PS2. I do like this one. This game's grown on me over the years. I wasn't a massive fan of it when it came out. I wanted more of a traditional Resident Evil kind of game. This one is a complete evolution of the game, completely over the shoulder shooting, more action focused, less on the horror elements. But it's still a fantastic game. Again, the PS2 version is one of the weaker ports in my opinion. I think the Wii version is great and the GameCube original is the way to go. But the PS2 version is fine. It's cool because it's got, who's not new anymore, but at the time it had new story DLCs where we play as Ada, which is always cool to get on a new port back in the day. But the PS2 version is fine. I still think the GameCube version looks the best out of the ports. And of course the Wii version, that plays awesome with the Wii remote. But the PS2 version is fine. So yeah, this concludes the Resident Evil update.
Resident Evil.
So that's it guys, that is what we've got for the Resident Evil collection update. I'm one game away from the PS1 set, which is the Resident Evil Director's Cut. And I'm one game away from the PS2 set to be completed, which is Resident Evil Outbreak File 2. Obviously I've just started the 360 set, so I've got a few games to get for that, and yeah, I'm already eyeing up other sets to maybe go for. But as we stand, I'm really happy with the collection so far. It's coming leaps and bounds. We've completed the GameCube set, we've completed the Wii set. I've got every game on the PS4 for Resident Evil, getting these stragglers for the PS1 and PS2. As always guys, let me know what you think of these games in the comments down below. And as always, let's continue to build a Resident Evil collection.